The desert air hung heavy with tension as Commander Jake Harlow swept his binoculars across the horizon. The vast expanse of the Chihuahuan Desert stretched before him, the border between El Paso and Juarez barely visible in the distance. Despite the sweltering heat, Jake showed no signs of discomfort. His weathered face remained impassive, eyes constantly scanning, mind calculating. "Sir, comms check complete. We're dark but operational." Lieutenant Rodriguez approached from behind, his footsteps deliberately heavy to announce his presence. Jake nodded without lowering the binoculars. "Satellite uplink?" "Secure, but intermittent. We've got a sandstorm brewing south of the border. Nature's providing cover. We'll use it." Jake finally lowered the optics, tucking them into the specialized pouch on his tactical vest. At Fort 2, his movements were still fluid, economical. No wasted energy, no unnecessary motion. 15 years with Delta Force had forged him into something beyond a soldier. The silver at his temples and the fine lines around his eyes were the only concessions to age. The forward operating base was little more than a cluster of modified shipping containers nestled against a rocky outcropping 30 miles east of El Paso. Officially, it didn't exist. Neither did Jake's team. 7 specialists handpicked from various special operations units, now operating under the umbrella designation of Task Force Spectre. Jake entered the command center, a space dominated by screens and communications equipment. The temperature dropped noticeably as the heavy-duty air conditioning battled the desert heat. Major Laurentian, their intelligence officer, looked up from her workstation. "We've got movement at the compound where they're holding Reeves," she said, pulling up thermal imaging on the main screen. 3 vehicles departed 20 minutes ago, heading west toward Nuevo Laredo. "Decoys," Jake said immediately. "They know standard protocol would have us tracking vehicle movement. Reeves is still in there." "How can you be sure?" asked Sergeant Wilson, the team's demolitions expert. Jake pointed to a smaller building adjacent to the main structure. "The power consumption to that outbuilding has tripled in the last 12 hours. They've added equipment, probably for interrogation." His jaw tightened momentarily, the only sign of emotion he allowed himself. "And they've doubled the guard rotation." The room fell silent. They all understood what was happening to Sarah Reeves. CIA field operative, deep cover analyst, and one of the most knowledgeable assets on cartel operations. She'd worked with Jake in Afghanistan years ago, before she transitioned to intelligence work, before the nightmares had driven him to seek transfer out of direct combat operations. "Tactical assessment?" Jake asked, breaking the silence. Major Chin swiped through several screens. "Compound is heavily fortified. 30-plus armed security, reinforced walls, surveillance systems. The Azteca Nuevo cartel spared no expense." "They wouldn't, not for such a high-value asset," Jake muttered. He studied the compound layout. "How long has she been in there?" 36 hours since confirmed capture." Jake nodded, processing the information with the cold efficiency that had become his trademark. His team watched him, waiting. They knew his mind was calculating angles, approaches, contingencies, running through scenarios with the precision of a supercomputer. The relationship between Jake and Sarah had always been complex. They'd served together during 2 tours in Kandahar. She is military intelligence, he is Delta. Their connection had been immediate, intense, and ultimately impossible to maintain in the chaotic world they inhabited. When she transferred to the CIA, and he remained with Delta, their paths had diverged. Now they intersected again, in the worst possible circumstances. "Sir," Rodriguez ventured, "the mission parameters from JSOC are clear. Intelligence retrieval only. The asset is—" He hesitated, considered compromised. Jake's eyes hardened. "The asset has a name, and our parameters just changed." He moved to the tactical table, pulling up the 3-dimensional model of the compound. "Wilson, I want breach options, multiple points. Chun, get me everything on their security rotations. Rodriguez, prepare the team for full tactical infiltration, night operation." Miller, he addressed the communications specialist. "I want surveillance drones running pattern rotations over the target, masked as border patrol. The team snapped into motion, each member moving with practiced efficiency. Jake stepped outside, needing a moment alone. The sun was setting, painting the desert in hues of orange and purple. He pulled out a worn photograph from his breast pocket, Sarah and him, standing outside a forward operating base in Afghanistan. Both younger, both smiling despite the war around them. Former Colonel Reed Harrison had warned him when he accepted command of Task Force Spectre. "You're here because you're the best," the old warrior had said, "but also because you're half that inside. Men like you function best in the shadows. Just remember why we do this." Jake had nodded, understanding perfectly. He'd seen too much, lost too many. The regular military couldn't contain men like him anymore, men who had stared into the abyss until the abyss became home. So they created Task Force Spectre, a ghostly presence operating in the spaces between official operations, handling the missions too sensitive or too brutal for acknowledgement. The weight of command settled on his shoulders as he watched his team prepare through the open door. Each was exceptional in their field, each carrying their own demons. Major Laurentian, brilliant tactician whose family had been murdered by Chinese triads, driving her to military intelligence. Lieutenant Carlos Rodriguez, former Marine Force Recon, whose rural Texas hometown had been infiltrated by cartel operatives. Sergeant Dwayne Wilson, whose explosive expertise had been honed dismantling IEDs in Iraq before losing his brother to cartel violence along the border. They were broken in different ways, but functional. Perfect for impossible missions. Miller approached, her slight frame belying her capabilities. "Drones are up, sir. And headquarters sent this." She handed him a secure tablet with a classified file. The file contained updated intelligence on the Azteca Nuevo cartel. Their leader, Alejandro El Cuchillo Salazar, had risen quickly through the ranks, leaving a trail of bodies and corrupted officials. His signature was brutality, both innovative and excessive. The file included images of what had happened to the last intelligence operative captured by Salazar's men. Jake closed the file, his expression unchanged. "Any update on why Reeves was in Ciudad Juarez?" Official cover was consulting for a manufacturing plant, but chatter suggests she was closing in on something big. Something that spooked the highest levels. Spooked them enough to risk taking an American intelligence officer. Jake's mind raced through the implications. This goes beyond drugs or weapons. Jake returned to the command center, where his team was already assembling equipment for the rescue operation. The familiarity of preparation steadied him, checking weapons, testing communications, reviewing tactical approaches. This was the world he understood, where chaos could be managed through training and precision. "Listen up," he addressed the team. "This operation is now classified level Echo. No communications outside this room. As far as anyone is concerned, we're running a training exercise." He paused, making eye contact with each team member. "Official mission parameters have been amended. This is now a dual-objective operation: intelligence retrieval and asset recovery." No one questioned the change. They'd followed Jake through worse situations, trusted his judgment when official channels failed. That was the purpose of Task Force Spectre, to operate in the gray areas where policy couldn't keep pace with necessity. "Sir," Rodriguez asked, "extraction point?" "We'll use the abandoned airstrip 12 miles south of the compound. Sergeant Wilson will secure it prior to our main infiltration." The planning continued well into the night, each team member contributing their expertise. Jake maintained his calm exterior, but inside, memories of Sarah churned relentlessly. Their last meeting had been 3 years ago, a chance encounter at the Pentagon. She'd seemed tired, carrying the weight of too many secrets. They'd promised to meet for coffee, to catch up properly. Neither had made the call. As midnight approached, Jake retreated to his quarters, a Spartan room with little more than a bed and desk. From his footlocker, he retrieved a small wooden box containing items he rarely examined, his numerous commendations, including 2 silver stars, a handful of foreign coins from countries where he'd operated. and a single brass key to a cabin in the Colorado mountains he'd purchased years ago but visited only twice. The satellite phone buzzed. He answered immediately. "Harlow, we've got movement at the compound." Chin's voice came through. "They're preparing something." Jake was already moving, muscle memory taking over as he grabbed his tactical gear. "Wake the team. I want eyes on this now." Within minutes, he was back in the command center, studying the live feed from the reconnaissance drones. The thermal imaging showed increased activity at the compound, vehicles being prepared, men moving with purpose. "They're relocating her," Jake concluded. "We're out of time." The original plan had called for 24 hours of surveillance before attempting infiltration. Now they would have to move immediately, with incomplete intelligence and minimal preparation. "Prep for immediate deployment," Jake ordered. "Full tactical loadout. Night infiltration protocol." As the team scrambled to prepare, Jake stood before the tactical display, his mind working through contingencies. The risks were enormous. Crossing into Mexico without authorization, engaging cartel forces, extracting a potentially compromised intelligence asset. If they succeeded, there would be no commendations, no recognition. If they failed, there would be no official acknowledgement, no retrieval of their bodies. Such was the reality of Task Force Spectre. The desert night enveloped them as they loaded into 2 unmarked helicopters, modified for silent operation. Jake's face was now covered in tactical camouflage, his eyes barely visible behind specialized night vision equipment. "Remember," he told his team over the secure comms as the helicopters lifted off, "we're going dark the moment we cross the border." No communications, no evidence, no witnesses. The helicopters banked south, flying low across the desert landscape, invisible to conventional radar. Below them, the border between 2 nations meant little, a human construct that neither the desert nor the predators who inhabited it respected. Jake checked his weapon one final time, the familiar weight reassuring in his hands. The cold emptiness that had become his constant companion since Afghanistan receded slightly, replaced by the razor-sharp focus of imminent combat. This was where he belonged, in the space between official and deniable, between impossible and necessary. The helicopters continued their silent journey into Mexican airspace, carrying 7 ghosts to confront the demons waiting below. 2 minutes to drop point. The pilot's voice came through Jake's earpiece. He nodded, though the pilot couldn't see him. His team was ready. He could feel their focused energy, the coiled tension of highly trained operators preparing for action. As the helicopters descended toward the drop zone, Jake allowed himself one final thought of Sarah. Not as the intelligence asset they were retrieving, but as the woman who had once made him believe there could be life beyond war. Then the tactical mindset took over completely. Commander Jake Harlow disappeared, replaced by the call sign that had become synonymous with impossible rescues and surgical precision. Spectre Actual, initiating deployment. He said into his comms as the helicopters touched down. Operation Darkwatch is go. The Blackhawk's rotors sliced through the night air, their sound dampened by specialized muffling technology. Jake and his team touched down 3 kilometers from the compound, the helicopter barely disturbing the desert scrub as it hovered inches above the ground. No lights, no radio chatter, just the practiced synchronization of elite operators slipping into hostile territory. Clear, Jake signaled as the last team member disembarked. The helicopter rose silently and disappeared into the night, scheduled to return only when signaled. The Mexican desert stretched around them, moonlight casting everything in stark silver and shadow. Jake activated his night vision, the world transforming into shades of green. He could see every detail, scorpions scuttling between rocks, the vigilant eyes of coyotes watching from a distance, the faint heat signatures of his team spreading out in practiced formation. Drone feed confirms vehicle movement at the north entrance. Chin's voice came through the secured comm system. For SUVs, heavily armed escorts. They appear to be preparing for transport. Jake signaled for the team to move forward. Their footsteps left barely any trace as they navigated the rocky terrain, each step calculated and precise. Years of training had made stealth second nature. Wilson, Rodriguez, establish overwatch position on the eastern ridge. Miller, Chun, communications intercept. Thompson, you're with me for close reconnaissance. The team split with practiced efficiency. Jake and Thompson, the team's infiltration specialist, moved toward the compound with silent precision. Their approach took them through a dried riverbed, providing natural cover against perimeter security. Through high-powered optics, Jake observed the compound. Unlike the typical cartel safe house, this facility had professional security measures, motion sensors, overlapping fields of fire, roving patrols with military precision. Someone had invested significant resources to protect whatever, or whoever, was inside. "Sir, we've intercepted communications." Miller's voice came through his earpiece. "Encrypted, but I'm running it through our systems." Picking up fragments, they're discussing transport protocols, mentions of the package, and special extraction. "Timeline?" Jake asked, his voice barely a whisper despite the secure channel. "Within the hour. They're waiting for someone." Jake's instincts flared. Something wasn't right. Cartels typically moved quickly after capturing a high-value target, relocating them to more secure facilities deeper in their territory. This methodical preparation suggested something else. "Chin, run facial recognition on the security personnel." Moments later, Chin responded, "Sir," getting multiple hits. These aren't standard cartel sicarios. Some are former military, Mexican special forces, a few American private contractors with questionable exit records. One confirmed former CIA operations specialist. Jake's suspicions deepened. This wasn't just a cartel operation. This was something more organized, more connected. "Rodriguez, any pattern to the patrol rotations?" Affirmative. Precise intervals, coordinated zones of coverage. This is professional security, military grade. Jake processed this information, recalibrating their approach. "Thompson, we need visual confirmation on Reeves. Follow me." The two operators slipped closer to the compound's perimeter, using natural formations for cover. Jake's mind worked through the tactical puzzle. The compound's security was designed not just to keep people out, but specifically to counter trained military infiltration. As they reached the southern wall, Jake detected an anomaly, a blind spot where two security cameras overlapped but left a 3-second gap when both panned away. He signaled to Thompson, and they used the momentary vulnerability to scale the wall, their movements fluid and silent. Once inside the perimeter, they pressed themselves against the shadows of an auxiliary building. Guards passed within feet of their position, but Jake and Thompson might as well have been ghosts, invisible, undetectable. "East building, second floor," Jake whispered, indicating a window where movement was visible. "Thermal suggests 2 guards, 1 seated figure." Thompson nodded, understanding the implication. The seated figure could be Sarah. "Miller, status on those communications?" "Sir, I've broken part of the encryption. They're discussing extracting maximum value before transfer of ownership. Also references to competing interests in a bidding situation." Jake's expression hardened. Sarah wasn't just being interrogated. She was being auctioned. His suspicions crystallized into certainty. This was no ordinary cartel operation. Someone with significant resources was using the Azteca Nuevo as a front for something much larger. "Rodriguez, Wilson, be prepared to provide cover fire on my signal. Chin, alert our extraction team to be ready for immediate evacuation. Thompson, we're going to get visual confirmation." Moving with the patience of predators, Jake and Thompson navigated through blind spots in the compound security, working their way toward the main building. At a side entrance, they encountered their first direct obstacle, a guard station with 2 armed men. Jake signaled a synchronized takedown. Without a sound, both operators closed the distance. A precise strike to pressure points, a controlled descent of unconscious bodies. The guards were neutralized without alerting anyone. Inside, the building had the sterile efficiency of a military installation rather than a cartel hideout. Jake checked his tactical display, tracking the positions of the remaining team members outside the compound. All were in position, ready to execute whatever plan he formulated. They moved through darkened corridors, avoiding patrol routes mapped from their surveillance. As they approached the second floor, voices became audible, Spanish mixed with English, discussing technical details that sounded jarringly like intelligence protocols. Jake and Thompson positioned themselves near a partially open door, listening intently. "The extraction window closes at 0300, a man was saying in accented English. "The buyer's representative will be here personally to verify the asset's value before transfer." "And if she continues to resist cooperation?" another voice asked. "The buyer has specialists who can extract what's needed directly from her brain. Cooperation is preferred but not necessary." Jake felt cold fury building behind his professional detachment. He signaled to Thompson, indicating they would proceed with visual confirmation before extracting. Using a fiber optic camera slipped through the door crack, they finally saw what they had come for. Sarah Reeves was secured to a chair in the center of the room, surrounded by monitoring equipment. Despite evident signs of interrogation, her posture remained defiant. Two guards stood at the door, and a man in an expensive suit paced before her. Jake recognized him immediately. Miguel Vasquez, officially a businessman with legitimate enterprises throughout Mexico, unofficially one of the most connected facilitators of illegal operations across the Americas. His presence confirmed this was no standard cartel activity. "Positive ID on the asset," Jake whispered into his calm. "Also present is high-value target Juliet 7. "Juliet 7? Miguel Vasquez." Chen's voice registered surprise. "Sir, this changes the operational parameters significantly. He's connected to at least 3 intelligence agencies, which means we need to move before they arrive," Jake responded. "New plan, simultaneous breach, immediate asset extraction, no witnesses." The coldness in his voice left no ambiguity about what "no witnesses" entailed. Task Force Spectre operated beyond the boundaries of conventional military rules of engagement. They were ghosts, and ghosts left no evidence. Jake and Thompson retreated to a secure position to coordinate with the rest of the team. The plan formed quickly. Wilson would create a diversion at the vehicle depot. Rodriguez would eliminate the perimeter guards at the north section. Miller would jam all communications, and Chun would guide them through the building's blind spots. "Execute in 3 minutes," Jake ordered. "Synchronize watches. Remember, this is now classified Omega level. No traces of U.S. involvement." As the team prepared, Jake took a moment to study the compound layout one final time. Something still bothered him about the security configuration. It seemed designed not just to keep people out, but to keep someone specific out. The patterns were familiar, almost as if. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The security protocols matched those he had helped design for high-risk detention facilities in Afghanistan. Someone had access to classified Delta Force containment procedures. "Chun, run a deep background check on Vasquez's security team. Look for anyone with connections to Task Force Anvil from Afghanistan." Moments later, Chen's voice came through, tense and urgent. "Sir, confirmed match. Vasquez, head of security, is former Army intelligence. Worked directly with Task Force Anvil in 2019. He has knowledge of your operational patterns." This changed everything. Their standard approach would be anticipated, countered before they could execute it. "Abort current plan," Jake ordered. "New approach. We use their knowledge against them." Quickly, he outlined a revised strategy that deliberately violated his own tactical doctrine. Instead of the precision infiltration expected of Delta operators, they would use Russian Spetsnaz-inspired methods: overwhelming force, maximum disorientation, psychological warfare. Wilson, instead of the vehicle depot, target their communications center first. Rodriguez, forget stealth. I want visible elimination of perimeter security. Make it look like rival cartel tactics. Miller, Chin, prepare for direct assault on the main building. The team acknowledged the new orders, adapting with the flexibility that made them elite. Jake and Thompson began backtracking toward the compound entrance, deliberately leaving evidence of infiltration, another violation of standard protocol that would confuse security trained to look for Jake's usual methods. As they moved, Jake accessed a secure channel to the extraction helicopter. Dust-off 1, mission parameters updated. Prepare for hot extraction, potential pursuit scenario. 3 minutes later, the night erupted into carefully orchestrated chaos. An explosion tore through the communications center, followed by the precision elimination of perimeter guards using techniques associated with rival cartels. Alarms blared across the compound as security forces responded to threats coming from multiple directions. Amid the confusion, Jake and Thompson moved directly toward their primary objective. The security team, expecting Delta's typical approach of quiet precision, had deployed resources to counter an infiltration that wasn't coming. Instead, Jake walked through the front entrance of the main building, eliminating resistance with brutal efficiency. "Chin, status on the target room?" Jake asked as he and Thompson cleared the first floor. "Second floor, East Wing. 2 additional guards have joined the original security detail. Vasquez is still present." Jake nodded to Thompson, and they moved up the stairs, encountering a guard patrol responding to the chaos outside. The encounter was brief, violent, and decisive, Jake moving with the lethal grace that had made him a legend in special operations circles. "Sir, additional vehicles approaching from the south," Miller reported. ETA 3 minutes. Signature matches Mexican Federal Police, but movement patterns suggest private military contractors. "The buyers," Jake concluded. "We need to move now." They reached the corridor leading to Sarah's location. 4 guards stood outside the door, heavily armed and on high alert. Jake signaled to Thompson, and both men activated specialized flashbang devices, modified to produce effects beyond the standard military issue. The corridor erupted in disorienting light and sound. Jake and Thompson, protected by specialized gear, moved through the chaos with practiced coordination. The guards, despite their training, were neutralized within seconds. Jake breached the door, his weapon leading. Inside, Vasquez was frantically gathering documents while 2 remaining guards took defensive positions around Sarah. Time slowed as Jake assessed the situation. 1 guard was reaching for Sarah, possibly to use her as a shield or to eliminate her before capture. The other was raising his weapon toward the door. Jake fired twice, precise shots that dropped both guards before they could execute either action. Thompson secured the room's perimeter as Jake approached Vasquez, who had frozen in place. "Commander Harlow," Vasquez said, his composed businessman's demeanor cracking slightly. "This is an unexpected pleasure." "Miguel," Jake acknowledged coldly, keeping his weapon trained on the man's center mass. "You've expanded your business model." "Merely facilitating a transaction between interested parties," Vasquez replied, as darting to the documents he'd been collecting. "Surely we can come to an arrangement that benefits everyone." Jake's expression remained impassive. "Thompson, secure the asset." "Miller, status on our exfil route." "Clear for the next 2 minutes, sir." Approaching vehicles have encountered Wilson's secondary explosives. Jake turned his attention to Sarah. Despite evident mistreatment, her eyes were clear, focused. She met his gaze with the same intensity he remembered from Afghanistan. "Took you long enough, Harlow," she managed, her voice hoarse but steady. "Traffic was hell," he replied, the ghost of a smile flickering across his face as Thompson cut her restraints. "Sir, the documents." Thompson indicated the papers Vasquez had been gathering. Jake nodded. "Bag everything. Chun, we need a full sweep of any digital systems." Already accessing their network, Chin confirmed. "Downloading all data now." Vasquez watched these proceedings with calculating eyes. "You realize what you're interfering with goes far beyond cartels or even intelligence operations. There are power structures at work that even your government doesn't control." Jake regarded him dispassionately. "Yet here we are." The sound of renewed gunfire outside indicated that their window for clean extraction was closing. Jake made a decision. "Vasquez comes with us," he ordered. "High-value intelligence package." Thompson secured the prisoner while Jake helped Sarah to her feet. She was weak but determined, gripping his arm with surprising strength. "They know about Obsidian," she whispered urgently. "That's what this is about. Not just me, they wanted confirmation about Obsidian." Jake's expression didn't change, but internally, alarm bells rang. Obsidian was a classified intelligence-gathering operation targeting corruption within U.S. agencies dealing with cartels. If Sarah had been working on Obsidian, and if the cartels knew about it, the implications were severe. "We'll discuss it at Extract," he said quietly. "Can you move?" She nodded, straightening with visible effort. "Just give me a weapon." Jake handed her his sidearm without hesitation. Despite everything, Sarah Reeves was still an operator at heart. "Rodriguez, status?" Jake called into his comm as they moved toward Extraction. "North entrance secured, sir. But we've got movement from the east. Looks like reinforcements." "Acknowledged. All units converge on Extraction Point Alpha. Priority is asset protection." The group moved through the compound, now in full security response. Gunfire echoed across the desert night as Rodriguez and Wilson provided covering fire from their positions. Miller joined them en route, bringing additional tactical gear. "Dust off one, prepare for immediate extraction," Jake ordered as they approached the designated point. "We're coming in hot with package +1. The helicopter was already descending as they reached the clearing, its rotors throwing dust and debris in swirling clouds. The team loaded quickly, professional discipline overriding the chaos around them. As Jake prepared to board, movement caught his eye, a figure emerging from the darkness, weapon raised. Without hesitation, Jake pushed Sarah into the helicopter and turned to face the threat. The shot came not from the approaching figure, but from behind, another assailant, hidden in the shadows. Jake felt the impact in his tactical vest, the bullet partially deflected but still tearing through his side. Despite the injury, he eliminated both threats with mechanical precision before climbing aboard. "Go," he ordered, and the helicopter lifted off, banking sharply to avoid ground fire. Inside, Chin was already administering first aid to his wound while Sarah watched with concern. Vasquez sat secured between Thompson and Wilson, his expression unreadable. "Miller, satellite uplink," Jake ordered through gritted teeth. "I want a secure channel to command." As the helicopter streaked across the border, Jake looked at Sarah, seeing beyond the physical damage to the intelligence officer underneath. "What's Obsidian connected to?" he asked quietly. Sarah glanced at Vasquez, then back to Jake. "Everything," she replied. "The cartels, the agencies, the contractors, Obsidian uncovered a network that spans all of it. That's why they wanted me. I'm not just an intelligence asset, Jake. I'm a verification key." Jake processed this, understanding dawning. This wasn't just about capturing an American operative. It was about confirming intelligence that could reshape the power dynamics of the entire border region. The helicopter continued northward, 7 ghosts and 2 unexpected packages returning from a mission that had just become far more complex than a simple extraction. Behind them, the compound burned, evidence erased in cleansing fire. Task Force Spectre had completed their immediate objective, but Jake knew this was just the beginning. Whatever Obsidian had uncovered, it was significant enough to risk capturing a U.S. intelligence officer on foreign soil. As dawn approached, Jake gave one final order before allowing Chin to administer stronger medication for his wound. "All communications regarding this operation are now classified Airbus level. No documentation, no reports." This never happened. The team acknowledged the order without question. They were used to operating in shadows so deep that even the government that created them could maintain plausible deniability. The desert passed beneath them, indifferent to the secrets being carried across its expanse. Another night's work for ghosts who officially didn't exist, fighting enemies no one would acknowledge, in a war without name or recognition. The Black Hawk touched down at an unmarked airstrip 40 miles north of the border. The first rays of dawn painted the sky in hues of crimson and gold, but there was no beauty in it for Jake, only tactical considerations about increased visibility and the need to complete transfer quickly. Medical personnel rushed forward to attend to Jake's wound and assess Sarah's condition. Vasquez was immediately transferred to a windowless transport vehicle, his expression still calculatingly calm despite being in U.S. custody. "Commander Harlow." Colonel Reed Harrison approached, his weathered face grim. At 60, Harrison looked older than his years, decades of classified operations etched into the lines around his eyes. As the official liaison between Task Force Spectre and the shadowy intelligence committees that sanctioned their operations, Harrison's presence at the landing zone signaled the severity of the situation. "Sir," Jake acknowledged, wincing as a medic applied pressure to his wound. "Walk with me," Harrison ordered, dismissing the medic with a gesture. Jake followed, ignoring the pain in his side. They moved away from the helicopter, finding privacy beside a fuel truck. "You were authorized for intelligence gathering only," Harrison said without preamble. "Instead, you conducted a cross-border extraction on Mexican soil, kidnapped a prominent businessman with diplomatic connections, and left a compound full of bodies. The mission parameters changed when we identified Vasquez and confirmed the broader implications," Jake replied evenly. Reeves mentioned Obsidian. Harrison's expression tightened, the only indication that the name had registered. "Obsidian is above your clearance, Commander." "Not anymore. Not when my team risked their lives extracting an asset connected to it." The two men stared at each other, a silent battle of wills that spoke to their long and complicated history. Harrison had personally selected Jake for Task Force Spectre, recognizing in the younger man the same willingness to cross lines for necessary outcomes. "This goes deeper than you realize," Harrison finally said. "There are agencies within agencies involved." Obsidian identified a network of corruption connecting multiple U.S. intelligence operations with cartel financing. Some very powerful people are implicated, which explains why someone was willing to risk capturing an American intelligence officer on foreign soil, Jake concluded. What was Reeves' role? She was investigating money trails. Started as standard anti-cartel operations, but she kept pulling threads until she uncovered something bigger. The kind of discovery that gets people killed or vanished. Jake absorbed this, connecting it with Sarah's comment about being a verification key. They didn't just want what she knew. They wanted confirmation that what they already suspected was accurate. Harrison nodded grimly. "And you just snatched both the verification and the verifier from their hands. There will be consequences." As if summoned by his words, Jake's secure phone vibrated. The message was from Chun. "Satellite imagery shows multiple vehicles converging on our FOB. Professional operators, not standard cartel." Jake showed Harrison the message. The colonel's expression darkened further. "They're moving faster than anticipated. Your base is compromised. I'll arrange immediate relocation for your team." "We need secure medical facilities for Reeves first," Jake insisted. "Already arranged. We have a black site medical facility in." Jake's phone vibrated again. The new message from Chun sent a chill through him. "Base defenses breached. Miller hit. Rodriguez holding perimeter. Communication compromised." "They're at our base already," Jake said, a cold fury building beneath his professional exterior. "My team is under attack." Harrison was already moving toward the communications tent. "We'll dispatch immediate air support." "No time," Jake cut him off. "I need that helicopter refueled now. My team, my responsibility." "You're wounded, Commander." Jake ignored him, already heading back to the Black Hawk. "Wilson, Thompson, with me. Immediate redeployment." The two operators, who had been helping unload equipment, immediately responded to the command in Jake's voice. They sprinted back to the helicopter, grabbing additional weapons and ammunition en route. "Jake." Sarah's voice stopped him momentarily. She had been moved to a medical transport, but fought off the attending personnel to reach him. "They knew exactly when to hit your base. That means they knew about your mission before you even launched it. The implications were clear. They had a leak, possibly at the highest levels. Trust no one outside your team," she added quietly. Jake nodded once, the connection between them transcending words. Then he was moving again, climbing into the helicopter despite the medic's protests about his wound. "Get me to those coordinates," he ordered the pilot. "Maximum speed, tactical approach." The Black Hawk lifted off, banking sharply northward. Inside, Jake checked his weapons with mechanical precision, his mind already formulating rescue scenarios. Wilson and Thompson did the same, their faces set in the expressionless masks of men preparing for extreme violence. "Sir, you're wound," Thompson said, nodding toward the blood seeping through Jake's hastily applied bandage. "Field dressing," Jake replied curtly. Thompson nodded, pulling medical supplies from his pack. As the desert landscape blurred beneath them, he applied a proper combat dressing to Jake's injury. Not enough for proper treatment, but sufficient to maintain operational capability. Jake's mind flashed back to Afghanistan, to another emergency extraction under fire. The parallels were unmistakable, the same desperate race against time, the same cold determination. Only the geography had changed. ETA 3 minutes, the pilot announced. Infrared showing multiple heat signatures around the target. Firefight in progress. Jake activated the tactical display, studying the layout of their compromised base. The attackers had come in force, at least 20 operators, using professional assault patterns. This wasn't a cartel hit squad. This was a trained military unit. "Wilson, Thompson, we go in hot, priority extraction of our personnel. No prisoners, no evidence." Both men nodded, understanding the directive completely. Task Force Spectre operated beyond the boundaries of conventional warfare, in the shadows where deniability was the only protection. The helicopter crested a ridge, and their forward operating base came into view. Smoke rose from several structures, and muzzle flashes indicated active combat zones. Through the tactical display, Jake could see defending positions where his remaining team members were holding out against the superior force. "Guns hot," he ordered the pilot. The helicopter's door gunner opened fire, raking the attackers' positions with devastating precision. The Black Hawk swooped low, providing both firepower and a distraction for the extraction. Touching down in Sector 3, the pilot announced. 30 seconds on the ground, maximum. Jake, Thompson, and Wilson positioned themselves at the doors, weapons ready. The moment the skids touched Earth, they were moving, a coordinated force of lethal intent. Jake ignored the tearing pain in his side, focusing instead on the tactical problem before him. The attackers, momentarily disoriented by the helicopter's arrival, redirected their efforts toward the new threat. Jake eliminated the first two with mechanical efficiency, creating a corridor toward the command center where Chin's last signal had originated. "Rodriguez, status." Jake called over the tactical frequency. "Northeast corner, pinned down," came the immediate response. "Miller's hit bad. Chin is with her in the communications bunker. Hold position. We're coming to you." Jake signaled to Wilson, who immediately changed direction to support Rodriguez, while Jake and Thompson continued toward the communications bunker. The base, designed for covert operations rather than withstanding direct assault, offered limited defensive options. Their only advantage was intimate knowledge of the layout. They reached the bunker entrance, finding it secured from the inside. "Chin, it's Harlow. Open up." The heavy door opened just enough to admit them before being resealed. Inside, Chin was maintaining surveillance through multiple screens while attending to Miller, who lay on an improvised medical table. The communications specialist's face was ashen, a makeshift pressure bandage covering a chest wound. "Status?" Jake demanded, kneeling beside Miller. "Collapsed lung, possible arterial damage," Chin reported clinically, though the tightness around her eyes betrayed her concern. "She needs immediate evacuation." Jake nodded, squeezing Miller's shoulder briefly, the only comfort he could offer. "Chun, download all mission data and destroy the systems. Thompson, help me with Miller." As Chun rapidly transferred critical intelligence to portable drives, Jake and Thompson prepared Miller for transport. The wounded operator remained conscious, her eyes clear despite the pain. "Sir," she managed, "they knew our protocols. Countered every security measure like they wrote the book." Jake nodded grimly. This confirmed his growing suspicion. They weren't facing cartel enforcers, but rather trained counterintelligence operatives with intimate knowledge of Task Force Spectre's procedures. Drives secured, Chen announced, initiating the base's data purge protocols. All systems would be wiped clean, leaving no intelligence for the attackers to recover. Rodriguez and Wilson are at the northwest exit, Thompson reported, checking the tactical display. Extraction route is temporarily clear. Jake made his decision. Move now. Thompson, take point. Chen, help me with Miller. They exited the bunker in tactical formation, Jake and Chen carefully supporting Miller between them. The firefight continued around the perimeter, but Rodriguez and Wilson were providing effective covering fire, creating a corridor toward the helicopter landing zone. Halfway to extraction, movement caught Jake's eye. A figure emerging from behind a storage container, weapon raised. Before Jake could react, the attacker fired, the bullet narrowly missing Chen but striking Jake in his already wounded side. The impact sent him stumbling, nearly dropping Miller. Despite the fresh wave of pain, Jake maintained his grip on Miller while returning fire one-handed. His shots found their mark, dropping the attacker permanently. Chen shot him a concerned glance, but Jake merely nodded for her to continue moving. They reached the extraction point where Rodriguez and Wilson were maintaining a defensive perimeter. The helicopter touched down, rotors still spinning for immediate departure. Load up, Jake ordered, helping transfer Miller to the waiting medics aboard. As the team boarded, Jake took a final survey of the base that had been their home for the past 8 months. The attackers were regrouping, preparing for another assault wave. He made a split-second decision. Wilson, the contingency package. Wilson nodded grimly, removing a specialized detonator from his tactical vest. When Task Force Spectre established any forward operating base, they always included a fail-safe, demolition charges positioned to eliminate all evidence of their presence if compromised. As the helicopter lifted off, Wilson activated the detonator. Below them, precisely positioned charges ignited, consuming the base in controlled destruction. Whatever the attackers had hoped to recover would now be ashes. The Black Hawk banked away, accelerating to maximum speed as they cleared the area. Inside, medics worked frantically on Miller, whose condition was deteriorating. She needs a proper medical facility within 30 minutes, the lead medic informed Jake, his expression grave. Jake checked the navigation system. Nearest secure facility is 40 minutes out. Then she won't make it, the medic stated bluntly. Jake refused to accept this assessment. Rodriguez, your blood type? O negative, sir. Set up for immediate transfusion. As the medical team established the field transfusion, Jake moved to the cockpit. I need options, he told the pilot. Closer medical facilities, even if not on the secured list. The pilot studied the navigation system. There's a Border Patrol medical station 20 minutes out. Basic trauma facilities, not rated for our operational security. Plotted, Jake ordered. We'll handle security concerns on arrival. He returned to the cabin, where Rodriguez was now connected to Miller, his blood flowing into her veins. The improvised procedure might buy them precious minutes. Chen approached Jake, her voice low. Sir, before systems went down, I captured data on the attacking force. Their communications used encryption protocols matching U.S. Special Activities Division. Jake absorbed this information with a deepening sense of betrayal. The Special Activities Division was the CIA's paramilitary operation branch, American operators attacking American operators. Were they trying to prevent our extraction of Reeves, or responding to it? He wondered aloud. Timeline suggests they were mobilized before our mission launched, Chen analyzed. They weren't responding to our extraction, they were attempting to eliminate anyone who knew about it. The implications were chilling. If Chen was correct, elements within their own intelligence community had sanctioned the elimination of Task Force Spectre, perhaps to clean up loose ends connected to Obsidian. Jake's secure phone vibrated. A message from an encrypted source he recognized as Sarah's private channel. Don't return to base. Compromise at highest levels. Will contact on secure channel Delta 6. He showed the message to Chen, whose expression remained professionally neutral despite the alarming content. Sir, If upper command is compromised, we have no safe harbor, she noted. We have options, Jake replied. Assets outside the official channels. Every veteran operator maintained personal contingencies, safe houses, resources, and contacts unknown to official records. Jake had several, established during years of black operations when he learned that official support could vanish without warning. Plot course to these coordinates, he instructed the pilot, providing the location of a private airfield owned by a former Delta operator who owed Jake his life. As the helicopter changed direction, Jake returned to Miller's side. The field transfusion had stabilized her temporarily, but her need for surgery remained critical. How much longer? The medic asked, maintaining pressure on Miller's wound. 15 minutes to basic medical facilities, Jake informed him. Can she make it? The medic assessed his patient with professional detachment. With the transfusion? Yes, but barely. She'll need immediate surgery. Jake nodded, already formulating the next steps. They would secure the Border Patrol medical station, ensure Miller's treatment, then vanish before any official response could trap them. The rest of the team would proceed to his contingency location to regroup and assess their situation. His wound throbbed with each heartbeat, a constant reminder of his own vulnerability. But physical pain was an old companion for Jake, easily compartmentalized and ignored when necessary. The greater concern was the tactical challenge they now faced, a covert team being hunted by the very government that created them. The helicopter began its descent toward the Border Patrol station, a small compound visible in the distance. Jake gathered his remaining able-bodied operators. Thompson, secure the landing zone. Rodriguez, you'll provide cover for the medical team. Chin, establish a communication blackout. No signals in or out except through our encrypted channels. As the team prepared for landing, Jake experienced a momentary flashback to Kandahar in 2014. His unit had been compromised then too, left without extraction when an operation went politically toxic. 8 operators had gone in. 3 had walked out, Jake among them. The experience had taught him invaluable lessons about survival when abandoned by command. 30 seconds to touchdown, the pilot announced. Jake forced the memories away, focusing on the immediate tactical situation. Remember, we're friendlies requesting emergency medical assistance. Minimum presence, maximum security. In and out before questions start. The helicopter touched down on the Border Patrol station's helipad. Medical personnel, alerted by the approach of a military aircraft, rushed forward with a gurney. Jake and Rodriguez transferred Miller to their care, providing only the essential medical information without operational details. Gunshot wound, pneumothorax, blood loss approximately 2 units, field transfusion performed. Jake informed the lead doctor, his tone brooking no questions about circumstances. The doctor, recognizing the nature of the situation from Jake's uniform and bearing, simply nodded. We'll take it from here. As Miller was rushed into the facility, Jake positioned his team strategically around the perimeter. Rodriguez, stay with Miller. The rest of you, back to the helicopter. We depart in 20 minutes, with or without Miller if her condition prevents movement. The harsh assessment reflected their reality. They couldn't risk the entire team for one operator, no matter how valued. Miller would understand. It was part of the unspoken code among those who served in units that officially didn't exist. Jake used the brief window to contact Harrison through a one-time encrypted channel, separate from official communications networks. Base compromised. Team under direct assault by Assad signature forces, he reported without preamble. Miller wounded, seeking emergency medical assistance. Request verification of command integrity. Harrison's response was immediate and grim. Command chain compromised. Director Reynolds and Section Chief Alvarez missing, presumed detained. Deputy Director Mason implementing security protocols. Jake processed this information. If the command structure of their oversight committee was being systematically dismantled, the situation was even more critical than he had initially assessed. Reeves' status? He asked. Secure for now. Vasquez being transported to Black Site Echo for interrogation. Keep Reeves and Vasquez separated, Jake advised. Different facilities, different security teams. Already implemented, Harrison confirmed. Where are you regrouping? Jake hesitated, years of operational caution making him reluctant to disclose their destination, even to Harrison. Contingency location. Will contact through established channels when secure. Harrison seemed to understand the implicit distrust. Trust your instincts, Commander. This goes higher than any of us anticipated. The connection terminated. Jake returned to his team. Chen approached immediately. Sir, I've been monitoring emergency frequencies. Multiple reports of training exercises being initiated along the border. Military and federal law enforcement establishing checkpoints on all major highways. They're looking for us, Jake concluded, using official channels to establish a dragnet. The realization settled over the team. They were now effectively being hunted by their own government, or at least elements within it powerful enough to mobilize multiple agencies. The Border Patrol Station's doctor emerged from the treatment area, approaching Jake directly. Your operative is stabilized. We've reinflated the collapsed lung and controlled the bleeding, but she needs a proper trauma center for comprehensive treatment. Is she transportable? Jake asked. The doctor hesitated. Not ideally, but yes, if necessary. Where would you be taking her? Classified, Jake replied automatically. Understanding flickered across the doctor's face. He had treated enough special operations personnel to recognize when not to ask questions. I can provide a field medical kit and instructions for continued care. Jake nodded gratefully. We'll need to move her within the next 10 minutes. As the doctor returned to prepare Miller for transport, Jake gathered his team for final instructions. Our situation has evolved beyond a standard compromised operation, he informed them. Elements within our own command structure are actively working against us. As of this moment, Task Force Spectre is operating under Prometheus Protocol. The team's expressions remained professionally neutral, but Jake could sense their tension. Prometheus Protocol was the ultimate contingency, complete disconnection from command structures, operating solely on the team leader's authority with no external support or oversight. Each of you has the option to separate now, Jake continued. Make your way to established safe harbors and await official clarification. No one will think less of you for choosing that path. The offer was genuine, but Jake knew what their responses would be before they spoke. These weren't ordinary soldiers. They were the shadows behind the shadows, selected as much for their moral flexibility as for their skills. We're with you, Commander, Rodriguez stated simply, speaking for all of them. Jake nodded, unsurprised but grateful nonetheless. Then we move as planned. Chin, give me options for getting past the checkpoints. Chun, ever efficient, already had alternatives prepared. Commercial air transport is compromised. They'll be monitoring passenger manifests. Land routes have checkpoints. But there's a freight train leaving from Tucson in 3 hours, routing through to our destination area. Minimal security, maximum anonymity. We'll take it, Jake decided. Thompson, acquire appropriate civilian attire and transportation from here to Tucson. Rodriguez, prepare Miller for movement. As the team dispersed to their assignments, Jake took a moment to assess their situation objectively. They were cut off from official support, pursued by elements of their own government, with a critically wounded team member and limited resources. Additionally, they possessed information that powerful figures would kill to suppress. The freight train thundered through the Arizona night, its rhythmic clattering providing sonic cover for the 6 figures concealed within a modified shipping container. Jake stood at the narrow observation slit they'd cut, watching moonlit desert terrain roll past. Behind him, his team had transformed the container into a temporary operational center. Medical station for Miller, communications array for Chun, weapons cache for Thompson and Rodriguez, and tactical planning space. Border checkpoint in 3 minutes, Chen announced, monitoring their position via a modified GPS system that masked their own signal while tracking law enforcement movements. Thermal scans active. Jake nodded. They had anticipated this. The container was lined with specialized material that diffused heat signatures, developed for covert operations in environments with advanced surveillance. Unless someone physically opened the container, they would remain undetected. Miller stirred on her improvised medical cot, consciousness returning in fits and starts. The Border Patrol doctor had provided emergency care and supplies, but her condition remained precarious. Status? Jake asked Rodriguez, who had been monitoring her vitals. Stable, but the wound needs proper surgical attention within 24 hours, Rodriguez replied, his face betraying concern despite his professional demeanor. Jake nodded, already calculating their next moves. The freight train would take them to a junction outside Phoenix, where they would transfer to another heading north. From there, they would make their way to his contingency location, a compound in the mountains owned through shell companies and unknown to official records. The train slowed as it approached the checkpoint. Jake tensed, hand moving instinctively to his sidearm. Despite their precautions, years of operational experience had taught him that no plan survived intact once executed. Multiple thermal scanners, Chen reported, monitoring the checkpoint through specialized equipment. Standard Border Patrol, plus military-grade surveillance systems. That's not standard procedure. The revelation confirmed Jake's suspicions. This wasn't just a reaction to their mission going sideways. This was a coordinated manhunt with resources typically reserved for high-value terrorist targets. They really want us, Thompson observed quietly. They want what we know, Jake corrected. About Obsidian, about Vasquez, about whoever's pulling the strings. The train crawled through the checkpoint, each second stretching into painful eternity. Jake remained perfectly still, controlling even his breathing, a technique learned from a Russian Spetsnaz operative during a joint operation years ago. The rest of his team did the same, their disciplined stillness a testament to their elite training. After what seemed like hours but was merely minutes, the train picked up speed again. Chen confirmed they had cleared the checkpoint without raising alarms. "Sir," Chen called softly, indicating her communications array. "I've been running pattern analysis on the search parameters being distributed to enforcement agencies. They're specifically looking for you, not the team." Jake processed this information. "Personal, not operational?" "Appears so. Your biometric data has been prioritized. The rest of us are secondary objectives." This changed the tactical equation. If he was the primary target, separating from the team might provide them better chances of reaching safety. "Not happening, sir," Rodriguez stated firmly, reading Jake's expression. "We move together." Jake didn't argue. Despite the logic of separation, the reality was that his team's best chance of survival lay in their combined skills. Alone, each would be vulnerable. Together, they remained a formidable force. "New development," Chen announced, her voice tense. "Intercepted communications indicate they've identified our transport method. Response teams mobilizing ahead at Phoenix Junction." The team exchanged glances, calculations running behind every pair of eyes. "Options?" Jake asked, already formulating his own assessment. "Abandon train before the junction," Thompson suggested. 12 kilometers out, there's a service road parallel to the tracks. "Too exposed," Rodriguez countered. "Satellite coverage would pick us up immediately." Jake studied the digital map Chen had projected. There, he indicated a 0.7 kilometers ahead. "Tunnel passage through the mesa. We exit during blackout, create false trail north, then double back south." The plan was quickly refined. The approaching tunnel would provide temporary cover from satellite surveillance. They would use that window to exit the train, leaving evidence suggesting they continued north, while actually moving south toward a secondary extraction point. "What about Miller?" Rodriguez asked, glancing at their wounded teammate. Jake had already factored this complication into his planning. "We construct a field stretcher. Thompson, Rodriguez, you'll alternate carrying her. Chen and I will provide security and navigation." The team immediately began preparations, converting their equipment into a lightweight tactical stretcher while gathering only essential supplies. Years of operating behind enemy lines had taught them efficiency, each item selected for maximum utility with minimum weight. As the train approached the tunnel, Jake felt the familiar clarity of imminent action settling over him. Combat always brought this strange calm, a crystalline focus where extraneous concerns fell away, leaving only tactical considerations. Some operators lost this clarity over time, but for Jake, it had only intensified, becoming an almost meditative state. 30 seconds to tunnel, Chin announced. Jake moved to Miller's side, helping secure her to the improvised stretcher. Despite her condition, her eyes were clear and focused. "I can move on my own," she insisted weakly. "Save your strength," Jake replied. "You'll need it when we reach the compound." The train entered the tunnel, darkness enveloping them completely save for their tactical lights. The moment the last car was within the tunnel's confines, Jake gave the signal. Thompson and Rodriguez opened the container's modified door while Chun maintained electronic countermeasures to mask any security systems. The team descended quickly, using ropes to reach the ground safely despite the train's continued movement. Jake went last, ensuring all equipment was either taken or destroyed. They had less than 3 minutes before the train would exit the tunnel and satellite coverage would resume. Once on the ground, they moved with practiced precision. Thompson and Rodriguez carried Miller on the stretcher while Jake and Chin established perimeter security. They crossed the tracks quickly, heading toward the tunnel's southern entrance, but stopping short of exiting. Jake directed their path into a narrow maintenance access corridor he had identified from the structural schematics Chin had pulled from transportation department databases. The confined space would be invisible to passing trains and external surveillance. "Plant the decoys," Jake ordered. Thompson retrieved several small devices from his pack, specialized decoys that would simulate thermal signatures and communication signals consistent with their team. These would be triggered remotely once the hunt moved north, creating false positives to divert resources away from their actual route. "Sir," Chin called softly, motioning Jake toward her position. She had established a secure uplink to monitor pursuit communications. They've mobilized air support, 3 helicopters with thermal imaging, converging on the junction in 17 minutes. Jake nodded, unsurprised by the escalation. "Maintain monitoring. I want to know the moment they realize we're not on that train." The team settled into the maintenance corridor to wait out the initial search pattern. Miller's condition remained stable but concerning. Her breathing shallow but regular, her wound requiring redressing every few hours. Jake used the forced pause to reassess their situation. The scale of resources deployed against them confirmed his suspicions. Whatever Obsidian had uncovered was significant enough to warrant burning a classified task force and risking public exposure of black operations. His tactical mind weighed the information they possessed. Vasquez had been a facilitator, a bridge between legitimate business, cartel operations, and apparently corrupted intelligence assets. Sarah had been investigating money trails that led somewhere significant enough to risk her capture. The pieces were there, but the complete picture remained elusive. "Commander," Chin approached, her voice low. "I've been analyzing the communication patterns of our pursuers. There are inconsistencies in their operational procedures." "Explain," Jake prompted. "Multiple agencies involved, but their coordination patterns suggest centralized command. However, the command signatures don't match established protocols for joint interagency operations." Jake understood the implication immediately. They're using official channels, but the operation isn't officially sanctioned. Chin nodded. Someone with high-level access is running their own operation outside the chain of command. This confirmed what Sarah had warned him about, corruption at the highest levels. Someone with sufficient authority to mobilize multiple agencies, but operating without official sanction or oversight. The sound of helicopter rotors grew audible even within their sheltered position. The search was intensifying. Jake checked his watch, nearly an hour since they'd abandoned the train. By now, the authorities would have discovered their absence. "Time to move," he decided. "They'll expand the search perimeter soon." The team gathered their equipment, preparing to exit the tunnel via the maintenance corridor's southern access point. Jake took point, using specialized optics to scan for surveillance before signaling the all-clear. They emerged into the desert night, immediately taking cover among rock formations. The helicopter search patterns were visible in the distance, their searchlights cutting through darkness as they expanded outward from the train's route. 6 kilometers to the extraction point, Jake informed the team, indicating a southwesterly direction away from the main search area. The journey would be challenging, crossing exposed terrain with limited cover, carrying a wounded teammate, while avoiding ground and air surveillance. But Task Force Spectre had been formed specifically for impossible missions. They moved in staggered intervals, utilizing natural terrain features for concealment. Thompson and Rodriguez alternated carrying Miller, never showing signs of fatigue despite the physical demands. Chen maintained constant surveillance of pursuit communications, adjusting their route to avoid patrols. 2 hours into their trek, Chen froze suddenly, raising a closed fist. The universal signal to halt and take cover. The team responded instantly, disappearing into the sparse desert vegetation and rock shadows. Moments later, the reason became apparent: a patrol vehicle traversing a dirt road less than 200 meters ahead. Its searchlight swept the terrain methodically. Border Patrol markings, but non-standard equipment, Chen whispered, studying the vehicle through specialized optics. Thermal and FLIR capabilities. Jake assessed their options. The vehicle was directly between them and their destination. Going around would add hours to their journey, time Miller might not have. "We take it," he decided. The team understood immediately. They would neutralize the patrol and appropriate their vehicle, using it to accelerate their journey while gaining access to enforcement communications. Jake outlined the approach using hand signals, a standard pincer movement with Rodriguez and Thompson flanking while he provided frontal distraction. Chen would remain with Miller, continuing to monitor broader pursuit communications. As the patrol vehicle paused to systematically scan a particular area, Jake put the plan into motion. He moved forward under cover of darkness, utilizing every shadow and depression in the terrain. Years of infiltration operations had made him practically invisible when he chose to be, his movements perfectly attuned to natural rhythms of the environment. At precisely the right moment, Jake deliberately triggered a small rock slide, creating noise 30 meters to the patrol's right. As expected, the vehicle's spotlight and attention immediately focused on the disturbance. In that moment of distraction, Rodriguez and Thompson closed from opposite flanks. The neutralization was swift, silent, and comprehensive. Both patrol officers subdued without gunfire or fatalities, using specialized techniques to render them unconscious without permanent injury. "Secure them properly," Jake ordered as he approached the vehicle. No evidence of force, no injuries. Task Force Spectre might operate beyond normal boundaries, but Jake maintained certain lines. These were American law enforcement, not enemies, merely tools being used by corrupted leadership. The team secured the officers with their own restraints, positioning them comfortably in natural shelter where they would be found once the team was long gone. Their communications equipment was disabled in ways that would appear as technical malfunction rather than sabotage. With the patrol vehicle secured, they quickly transferred Miller to the more comfortable rear compartment and resumed their journey. The appropriated vehicle gave them both increased speed and legitimacy if spotted from a distance. "New communication intercepts," Chen announced from the back seat where she had patched into the vehicle's systems. "They found our decoys. Search resources redirecting north." Jake nodded in satisfaction. The deception was working, creating breathing room for their actual movement south. They might yet reach the extraction point without further confrontation. The desert landscape passed swiftly now as they followed seldom-used maintenance roads toward their destination. Jake's mind returned to the fundamental question: what had Sarah uncovered that warranted such extraordinary measures? Obsidian had been investigating financial connections between cartels and intelligence operations. Vasquez had been a facilitator with diplomatic connections. The forces pursuing them operated through official channels but outside official oversight. The pattern was emerging, not just corruption, but systematic cooperation. Intelligence agencies using cartel operations to fund activities beyond congressional oversight. Cartel organizations receiving operational support and protection in exchange. If Sarah had evidence of such arrangements at the highest levels, it would explain both her value to those involved in the desperate measures to recover or eliminate her and anyone connected to her discovery. As they approached the extraction coordinates, Jake's instincts triggered a warning. Something felt wrong. The area was too quiet, too perfect. He signaled for the vehicle to stop a kilometer short of their destination. Chin, full spectrum scan. She activated specialized equipment, sweeping the area ahead for electronic, thermal, and communication signatures. Her expression confirmed Jake's suspicions. Ambush configuration, she reported, displaying the tactical readout. Multiple positions, professional deployment. They're waiting for us. Jake studied the data, respect begrudgingly forming for whoever had anticipated their moves so accurately. The extraction point, a remote airstrip where they had arranged for a private pilot to meet them, had been compromised and turned into a trap. How? Thompson verbalized the question on everyone's mind. That extraction point wasn't in any official records. Which means the leak is more personal, Jake concluded. Someone who knows my contingency protocols. The realization hit like physical impact. Only a handful of people had that level of knowledge about his operations, all of them trusted implicitly until now. Nearest alternative? He asked Chin. She consulted her navigation system. There's a ranch 70 kilometers southeast, owned by former Delta, Marcus Reynolds. Jake knew the location, another veteran who had chosen isolation after too many compromised operations and betrayals. They had served together briefly before Jake's transition to Task Force Spectre. We head there, he decided, but not directly. They're anticipating our movements too accurately. We need to break pattern. The team understood, immediately shifting to counter-pursuit protocols developed for operations behind enemy lines. They abandoned the patrol vehicle after wiping it clean of evidence, transferring Miller to the stretcher again. Then they separated briefly, creating multiple trail patterns before reconverging 2 kilometers away, now moving east instead of south. The dance of pursuit and evasion continued through the night and into dawn. Jake led his team through ravines and dry washes, using the desert terrain to mask their movement while creating false trails. They avoided all roads and known patrol routes, staying in the spaces between organized search patterns. By midday, the desert heat had become their most immediate enemy. Water supplies were carefully rationed, with Miller receiving priority to maintain her precarious stability. The team moved only during the brief shadows of dawn and dusk, finding shelter during the brutal midday sun. Despite these hardships, morale remained intact. This was what they had been trained for, the scenarios they had rehearsed countless times. Task Force Spectre operated in the darkest spaces of modern warfare, where official support could vanish in an instant, where survival depended on preparation and adaptation. As dusk approached, they reached a vantage point overlooking a vast expanse of desert. In the distance, barely visible, stood the isolated buildings of Reynolds Ranch. So close to potential sanctuary, yet the open terrain between presented a significant tactical challenge. No cover for the approach, Rodriguez observed, studying the landscape through binoculars. We'd be exposed for at least 2 kilometers. Jake considered their options. Miller's condition was deteriorating despite their best efforts. The field medical supplies were inadequate for her needs. They needed to reach proper facilities soon. We wait until full dark, then approach from multiple directions, he decided. Chin with Miller on the direct route. Thompson from the east, Rodriguez from the west. I'll take point, verify the location is secure before the rest move in. The plan acknowledged their greatest vulnerability. Miller's condition necessitated the quickest possible route to safety, even at increased tactical risk. As full darkness descended, they prepared for the final approach. Jake administered the last of their medical supplies to Miller, whose eyes flickered open at his touch. "Commander," she whispered, her voice weak but determined. "If this goes sideways." Obsidian. The data I downloaded before the attack. It's in my tactical tablet, encrypted under Protocol 7. Jake squeezed her shoulder in acknowledgement. Protocol 7 was their team's highest security designation, requiring multiple authentication factors from separate team members. "We'll all make it," he assured her. The years of combat had taught him never to make promises in the field. The team moved out according to plan, separating into their assigned approaches. Jake advanced swiftly across the open terrain, using every minimal depression and shadow. His senses were hyper-alert, scanning constantly for any sign of surveillance or threat. The ranch appeared quiet as he approached. No lights, no movement, no signs of occupation except the expected security measures of a paranoid veteran. Jake recognized Reynolds' setup, passive sensors covering the perimeter, holding positions established with interlocking fields of fire, escape routes pre-planned and supplied. As he reached the outer sensor perimeter, Jake transmitted the recognition signal they had established years ago, a specific electromagnetic pulse pattern that identified him as friendly. The absence of an immediate counter-signal was concerning. Jake paused, instinct screaming warnings. Reynolds should have acknowledged by now if he was present. The continued silence suggested either absence or compromise. He changed approach, moving toward a secondary entrance point they had established during a previous visit. The small bunker hidden beneath an ordinary storage shed would give him access to the security systems without exposing his team. As Jake reached the shed, movement caught his peripheral vision, a shadow detaching from deeper darkness near the main house. He froze, weapon ready, identity uncertain. Still moving like a ghost, "Harlow," a familiar voice called softly. "Almost shot you 3 times on your approach." "Reynolds," Jake acknowledged, tension easing marginally. "Security protocols." "Compromised," Reynolds replied grimly, emerging fully from concealment. The former Delta operator looked older than his 50 years, desert life etching deep lines into his weathered face. "Had visitors yesterday. Professional types asking questions. Didn't identify themselves, but had government written all over them." Jake absorbed this news. Their pursuers were casting a wider net than anticipated, checking known associates and potential safe harbors. Did they leave surveillance? Reynolds nodded. Standard package, directional mics, passive infrared, probably satellite tasking. "I left it all in place." Jake understood the veteran's strategy. Removing discovered surveillance would only confirm suspicions and trigger more intrusive measures. Better to let them believe their setup was undetected. "I need immediate medical for a team member, then transport for 5, Jake stated. Reynolds didn't hesitate. "Medical supplies in the bunker. Got a hidden hangar a mile east with a working Cessna. Enough fuel for 1,000 miles. The directness of operational planning between veterans required no additional explanation. Reynolds understood the situation without needing details. A team in the wind, pursuing forces with official resources, a wounded operator needing evacuation. Jake signaled the rest of his team to approach, maintaining maximum dispersion as they converged on the ranch. Within minutes, Miller was transferred to the underground bunker where Reynolds had established a surprisingly well-equipped medical station. "Old habits," the former operator explained, seeing Jake's raised eyebrow at the surgical-grade equipment. "When you've been left bleeding as often as we have, you learn to handle it yourself." Dawn broke over the mountains as the Cessna banked gently toward a private airstrip nestled in the Colorado wilderness. Jake sat in the co-pilot's seat, his wound throbbing despite Reynolds' field treatment. In the cabin behind him, Miller lay stabilized on a makeshift stretcher, her condition improved after Reynolds' surprisingly skilled surgical intervention. The rest of the team maintained vigilant watch through the aircraft's windows, weapons ready despite their apparent escape. Reynolds had come through beyond expectations, not only providing immediate medical assistance, but also arranging for a contact at their destination, another former operator who had transitioned to civilian medicine. The network of veterans who had chosen to disappear from official records had proven more valuable than any government support structure. The airstrip came into view, a narrow slash of cleared land among dense pine forest, with a single cabin and outbuilding visible nearby. No vehicles, no personnel, no signs of surveillance or compromise. Looks clear, Thompson observed from behind Jake, scanning the approach through specialized optics. Jake nodded but maintained his cautious assessment as the plane descended. Years of operations had taught him that safety was often most illusory when it seemed most complete. The landing was smooth despite the primitive conditions, the aircraft rolling to a stop near the cabin. Within moments, a solitary figure emerged, a tall woman with the unmistakable bearing of military training despite her civilian clothing. Dr. Montgomery, Reynolds explained. Former Navy medical officer. Served in Pakistan, then Syria. Disappeared from the system 5 years ago when an operation went politically inconvenient. Jake recognized the pattern. Another ghost from the shadows of modern warfare. Another professional who had discovered the harsh truth about disposability when missions conflicted with political narratives. The team disembarked with practiced efficiency. Miller transferred to a proper stretcher provided by Montgomery. The doctor's assessment was immediate and professional, her expression revealing nothing as she examined Miller's wound. Good field work, she commented to Reynolds. Bought her time. She needs blood, antibiotics, and monitoring, but prognosis is positive. Relief flickered briefly across the team's faces before their professional masks returned. Miller would survive, the first piece of genuinely good news since this operation began. As Montgomery and Chin transported Miller to the cabin's medical room, Jake gathered the remaining team for tactical assessment. The immediate crisis had passed, but their situation remained precarious. We've created distance and broken pursuit patterns, he began, but we need to assume they'll eventually track us here. We have 48 hours at most before we need to move again. Rodriguez and Thompson nodded in understanding. The rhythm was familiar. Move, assess, prepare, move again. The life of operators whose existence had become inconvenient to those in power. What about Reeves? Thompson asked. Any contact? Jake shook his head. No secure channel established yet. We have to assume she's either in protected custody or compromised. The implication hung heavily. Sarah possessed critical information about Obsidian, information that explained why such extraordinary resources were being deployed against them. If she had been captured by the corrupted elements within the intelligence community, that information could be lost or weaponized. We need to access Miller's data, Jake decided. Protocol 7 encryption requires 3 team members for authentication. Once she's stabilized, we get her credentials. The team nodded in agreement. Protocol 7 was their highest security measure, a triple-authenticated encryption system requiring biometric and knowledge factors from multiple team members. They had implemented it specifically for scenarios where command structure couldn't be trusted. As Rodriguez and Thompson established perimeter security around the cabin, Jake found a moment alone. He checked his wound. The field treatment had been effective but temporary. He would need proper medical attention eventually, but for now, the pain remained a useful focus point, keeping his mind sharp and present. The satellite phone Reynolds had provided buzzed, a rare interruption in their communications blackout. The incoming signal used one of their emergency protocols, suggesting a trusted source. Harlow, he answered, voice guarded despite the security measures. It's Harrison. The colonel's voice sounded strained, background noise suggesting he was on the move. Situation has escalated. Director Reynolds found dead, apparent suicide. Mason's been detained. Sarah Reeves is missing from secure custody. Jake absorbed this information with growing concern. The command structure was being systematically dismantled, key players eliminated or neutralized. What about Vasquez? He asked. Disappeared during transfer to interrogation. Transport team all dead. Professional hit, military precision. The pattern clarified further. Someone was cleaning house, eliminating everyone connected to Obsidian and whatever it had uncovered. Who's giving the orders, Colonel? Who has the authority to mobilize these resources outside chain of command? Harrison's hesitation was brief, but telling. That's why I'm contacting you. Before everything went sideways, Sarah managed to pass me a message. Said if things collapsed, I should direct you to the Montana arrangement. Said you'd understand. Jake's mind immediately connected to a conversation years ago in Afghanistan. Sarah had mentioned a personal contingency, a secure location with evidence too dangerous to trust to official channels. At the time, he thought it operational paranoia. Now it seemed prescient. I understand, he confirmed. Where are you now? Compromised safe house in Virginia. Moving every 6 hours. They haven't found me yet, but it's just a matter of time. Jake made a quick decision. We have possible lead on Obsidian data. We'll pursue and contact you through emergency channel Delta if confirmed. After ending the communication, Jake rejoined his team, finding them gathered around Miller, who had regained consciousness. Despite her weakened state, her eyes were clear and focused. Commander, she acknowledged. Ready for debrief. Jake sat beside her, the team forming a protective circle. Miller, before the attack on our base, you mentioned downloading data related to Obsidian. We need to access it. She nodded weakly. Encrypted under Protocol 7. Tablets in my pack. Rodriguez retrieved the device, a specialized tablet designed for military intelligence operations, hardened against both physical damage and electronic intrusion. Authentication sequence, Jake ordered. The Protocol 7 procedure began, Miller providing retinal scan and voice authentication, Jake and Chun contributing their biometric and knowledge factors. The tablet processed their inputs, security measures verifying each layer before proceeding to the next. Finally, the encryption unlocked, revealing the contents of Miller's download, a partial data cache from Obsidian's investigation. The team leaned forward as Chun navigated through the files, projecting them onto a secure display. What they saw transformed their understanding completely. Obsidian had uncovered not just corruption, but systematic conspiracy, a shadow network connecting certain intelligence officials, military contractors, political figures, and cartel leadership. The operations extended beyond drug trafficking into weapons development, experimental technology transfers, and unauthorized intelligence operations in allied countries. Most disturbing were the financial records, billions in black funds flowing through elaborately disguised channels, supporting operations never authorized by congressional oversight. The money trail connected to high-level officials across multiple agencies, including several names Jake recognized from the upper echelons of command. This explains the response scale, Chin observed. They're not just protecting operations, they're protecting an entire parallel structure. Jake nodded grimly. And anyone with access to this information becomes an existential threat to that structure. The team fell silent, processing the implications. They weren't facing rogue elements or isolated corruption. They were facing a systematized shadow governance with resources comparable to official channels. Sarah's message, Jake finally said. The Montana arrangement. She has more complete evidence secured, evidence she kept outside official systems. Where in Montana? Rodriguez asked. Lake property near Whitefish. Purchased through triple-blind ownership structure. We spent a weekend there once, years ago. She showed me a secure room beneath the boathouse. Thompson and Rodriguez exchanged glances, the unspoken question evident. Was this professional insight or personal connection speaking? Jake ignored the implied question. We move in 12 hours. Miller stays here under Montgomery's care. The rest of us retrieve Sarah's evidence. As the team dispersed to prepare, Jake found himself alone on the cabin's small porch, watching darkness settle over the mountains. The transformation within him was almost physical, a shift from tactical survival to strategic purpose. For years, he had operated within the shadows of official policy, executing missions without questioning the larger framework. Even when Task Force Spectre was formed to handle the darkest operations, he had maintained the belief that they served legitimate national interests, despite methods that crossed conventional boundaries. That belief had been systematically dismantled over the past 72 hours. The evidence suggested something more sinister, a corruption so deeply embedded that it had become almost indistinguishable from the institutions it had infiltrated. Jake's military career had been built on loyalty to country rather than to individuals or administrations. The distinction had allowed him to operate through changing political landscapes while maintaining his core purpose. Now that loyalty demanded something different, confronting corruption that threatened the very institutions he had served. The cabin door opened behind him, Chen stepping out to join his solitary watch. "Miller's stabilized," she reported. "Montgomery says she'll recover fully with proper rest." Jake nodded, acknowledging the good news without shifting his gaze from the darkening forest. "The data analysis is complete," Chen continued. "The network Obsidian uncovered. It's far more extensive than initial review suggested. At least 7 senior intelligence officials, 3 military generals, multiple political appointees across administrations. And Vasquez was their facilitator," Jake concluded. "The interface between legitimate power and cartel resources." Chen hesitated before asking the question that had clearly been forming. "Sir, given the scale of what we're facing, should we consider alternative approaches? Whistleblower protocols, media channels?" Jake understood her thinking, the traditional last resort when command structures failed. But the evidence suggested even those channels might be compromised or manipulated. "We follow Sarah's lead," he decided. She kept this evidence separate for a reason. Once we have the complete picture, we determine the appropriate response. Shin accepted this with a nod, her expression reflecting the same transformation Jake felt, the shift from operators executing missions to something more fundamental, defenders of institutions against internal corruption. "Rest while you can," Jake advised. "We move at dawn." As Chin returned inside, Jake remained on the porch, his mind processing tactical considerations while deeper currents shifted beneath. Throughout his career, he had been the weapon directed by others, the ghost who executed necessary operations without leaving traces. Now circumstances demanded something different, not just tactical execution but strategic direction, not just a ghost, but a reckoning. The mountains stood silent around him, their ancient presence a reminder of forces that outlasted human machinations. Somewhere beyond them lay answers, evidence, and possibly Sarah herself, if she had escaped whoever was eliminating loose ends. Jake checked his weapon, a habitual motion that anchored him in the concrete amidst shifting abstractions. Whatever awaited in Montana, whatever conspiracy Obsidian had uncovered, his purpose had crystallized. Task Force Spectre had been created to operate in shadows beyond official acknowledgement. Now they would use those same skills against the corruption festering within. 3 weeks after retrieving Sarah's complete evidence cache from Montana, Jake stood on the secluded balcony of a safe house in northern Idaho. The mountain air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and approaching winter. Behind him, inside the fortified cabin, his team coordinated with the trusted remnants of legitimate intelligence oversight, the few uncorrupted officials Harrison had carefully vetted and assembled. The evidence Sarah had secured was devastating in its completeness: digital records, financial transactions, recorded meetings, and sworn testimonies from operatives who had participated in the Shadow Network before recognizing its true nature. Most critically, it included a secure server containing the complete Obsidian investigation, protected by encryption that had kept it from those attempting to bury the truth. What had begun as a rescue mission had transformed into something far more significant: the systematic dismantling of corruption that had metastasized within the institutions they had sworn to serve. The first arrests had been made quietly, key figures detained under national security protocols before they could flee or destroy additional evidence. Sarah herself had emerged from hiding 3 days after they secured her evidence cache. She had escaped during transport after her initial extraction, recognizing that corrupted elements had infiltrated even the protective custody protocols. Her foresight in establishing independent evidence storage had proven the critical factor in exposing the entire network. Miller had recovered enough to rejoin the team, though her field operations days were likely finished. She had accepted this with the stoicism characteristic of elite operators, finding new purpose in coordinating the intelligence analysis of the recovered Obsidian data. Jake heard footsteps approaching, and turned to see Sarah joining him on the balcony. The weeks since her rescue had erased some of the physical evidence of her captivity, but her eyes still carried the watchfulness of someone who had seen behind the curtain of power and survived to expose it. "Harrison just confirmed. The last of the identified network heads is in custody," she informed him. "The Senate Intelligence Committee has scheduled closed-door hearings for next month." Jake nodded, absorbing the news with controlled satisfaction. "And the cartel connections?" "Mexican authorities have moved against Azteca Nuevo leadership using our evidence. Vasquez was found dead in Guatemala. Apparently his former clients decided he was a liability. The cartel's defeat was undeniable." Though some questioned the extent of Jake's actions, most celebrated the powerful message sent. America does not bow to intimidation. Jake, humble yet firm, quietly stepped back from the limelight, continuing duties without fanfare, steadfast in moral clarity. Their story stands as a testament to an enduring American truth, that genuine strength lies not in aggression but in preparedness, resolve, and the unwavering commitment to justice and liberty for all. What do you think about this incredible stand? Do you believe strength alone guarantees justice, or does real power lie in partnership, strategy, and bravery? Share your perspective in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe for more gripping real-life stories of courage in the face of overwhelming odds.